Okay, so here we are back in Max, and what I want to do now is get this file ready to export. Okay, and what I'm going to do is actually open up a different one. This one that I did with the ammo pouch is actually a more completed version of the weapon, and if I unhide all here, you can see these are all my parts, including the bullets and the bones that are going to be used to control this. Got a bone here to socket a muzzle flash to and whatnot. Okay, there you go. Okay, let me zoom out here. I just want to drop this back down, this element here. So let's hit 5, select this element. Okay, laggy, laggy, laggy. Alright, hit E from my rotate tool, make sure I'm on angle snap. And you can see my pivot's all way up here, so if I try to use that pivot, it's not going to work for me. So what I want to do, I have a bone aligned there, so I'm going to say pick this bone, okay, and then I want to use that bone's pivot, and now I can drop that down, and I want to come down 90 degrees because I rotated up 90 degrees originally. You can see that's back in position. Okay, so being able to switch pivots around is nice. Okay, so now I have this whole object here, here, and here. I'm going to hide unselected. So this is what I'm going to export. I'm going to export this as a single object. You can see it's 10,367 polygons, which is actually pretty much exactly at the budget that we've set. We've said, okay, try to hit 10,000 around that area. Up or down is okay a little bit here and there, but I don't want to see any 25,000 poly weapons. Oop, my headphones are falling off. And I don't want to see any 800 poly weapons because it's just crap, unless it's a knife or I don't know, a cube or something. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to combine all of these. Now, if I look at my unwrap here, which goes off the screen, but that's okie dokie because I just picked unwrap UVW. I'll pop this open. You can see here that I got a piece here that I actually kind of messed up that I moved out, but what that is actually to show you real quick. It's this right here. I might need to paint it gray, but you just see this little sliver, and I added it later because we didn't have it originally, and what happened was you could see through the model right here, right there, and right here that face was missing, so I just plopped that in and just stuck it somewhere with no real concern, just to block being able to see through the model. So what I'm going to do is I need to prepare this in a very specific way, and what I'm going to do is I need to get all of these individual things that are unwrapped onto the same tile, and then I need a second UV channel where all of that unwrapped stuff is it's a little bit hard to explain, is quadranted out basically. So what I'm going to do is first do a little management on my IDs here, because this is actually going to allow me to organize this in the UV editor. Okay, that's ID 1, and this piece here is going to be ID 2. Okay, this whole thing I want on ID 3. How that got to 12, I don't know. And this whole bullet object here is going to be ID 4. Okay, so I got 1, 2, 3, and 4. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach all of these together. And now if I come here and I say select ID 1, it's going to get all the ID 1 files. Okay, if I select ID 2, it's going to get that block that I separated. Select ID 3, gets the ammo pouch, and select ID 4 gets the bullets. So now I'm going to hit this with my uncrap modifier here. You can see that some of the pieces are already overlaid, but others are not. So what I need to do is I need to move these all into the same location. So I'm just going to take this guy, and to do that, I showed this earlier, but if I want to move it so it's in the exact same space in a tile, but one tile over, I can do one full tile over. And this guy happens to need to go 2 tiles over, which is to the left, which is negative. And now what I've done is I've overlaid everything on top of each other, and it looks like a freaking disaster, right? It's an absolute jumble mess. However, I can organize it. You can see that if I don't show my map, that there's nothing, there is something overlapping. I need to find out what some of these pieces are on the gun so I can make sure. Let me check ID 2 real quick. I'll drop this down. This probably goes off the screen, but it just drops down. It says all IDs and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So let me show ID 2. I think some of my IDs are actually messed up. Because that should actually, now if I tell this over here when I'm selecting, this is my selections on the model, these are my selections on in the UV template. I want to change my selection over here on the model to make sure I'm getting element. No. Okay, so this piece actually needs to be on ID 2. So if I just convert that to an editable poly using my hotkey, this I move to ID 2 as well. Okay? So just click that up to set ID 2. Okay, now I can go back to my UVs. I forgot I put that on there as well. No biggie. No big whoop. And I'm going to check here. Try to move this up a little bit so you can see this list. ID 2. You can see, just don't want to show my map because it confuses my eyeballs. You can see that's one layout. ID 1. That's another layout. However, this guy here actually should be the same ID as the ammo pouch because it fits in that UV space, which I believe is 3. I slapped it in there. So I need to make sure that that goes into ID 3. Okay. So I'm just going to zoom in to that spot, and I remember where it is. So it's this. Actually, it kept it selected. So if I hit F3, you can see it's the back of this guard thing here. I want to make sure that's ID 3. Okay. Now, the only reason I know these things is because I managed this in the beginning. I decided what was going to go in each different template. As you decide what's going to go on a separate texture, you will know on your model what to do. Okay. Obviously, I did not, show the modeling of this, and I did not model this myself again. I want to thank Michael for doing this model for me. So now, again, we're going to go back to unrep and just check again. I got to be very certain here that this is correct because this is very, very important. So ID 1, I want to show my map so my eye sockets can unstrain. Just want to look for anything that's just clearly overlapping. And again, this is a super complex unwrap. Each piece is unwrapped pretty much perfect, except there's just so many of them that it's a veritable puzzle. It's a nightmare. Okay, and it was not exactly fun laying it out. And let me check ID 4, which is the bullets. And that looks good. So each individual ID looks good. However, they're all in the same location. Okay? Which is what we want, because we want each one to fill out each texture. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to give this, I'm just going to close that. You can see here that this is my map channel 1. In UDK, that translates to the UV channel 0. Alright, UDK starts at 0, and this starts at 1. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to add a new modifier stack, or a new unwrap UVW to the modifier stack, excuse me, and I'm going to say channel 2. Now, it's going to give me a very important set of options, and I'm just going to read it here. Okay, I've chosen a new channel, and what do I want to do? Okay, this modifier contains edits to only one channel at a time, alright? Now, do I want to move the UVs from the current channel, which was 1, to the chosen channel? Or do I want to abandon those moves, and do I want to keep whatever was already in this channel, which was actually, at this point, nothing? Okay, so if I abandon, it's going to reset all the UVs, and I don't want that. I want to move channel 1 to channel 2. The first time I do this, okay? So now, if I open the UV editor on this guy, I'm just going to pop it up over here, you can see it's the same thing, okay? Show map. Alright, now is where I am going to do a little bit of management magic, okay? So I'm going to show my grid, and what I want to do is I want to quadrant each one of these out in this second UV channel, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm on channel 1 going to select all these faces. Okay, you can see that on the model it's picked everything that I mapped onto this particular texture. Okay, this corresponds to my main diffuse texture here, and I'm going to scale this into a corner. So what I want to do is I want to use my percent snap toggle up here, because that works here, and if I use this tool I can hold control as I click this corner, and I can tuck that up into a corner. Okay, so that's quadrant 1. If I come to 2 here, I changed my channel here. Sorry, I had that off of view, I think. I switched this to 2, okay? And you can see that all that crap is still there, and it might freak you out, but the reason it is still there is because it is still selected. So if I just click off, it disappears, because I'm only previewing channel 2 here. So I'm going to take channel 2, which is all these other bits, and I'm going to move that up into quadrant 2. Okay? Then I'm going to take channel 3, not channel, take this, and I'm going to slap that down into quadrant 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. If anybody knows math, quadrants go in a clockwise fashion. Okay? I sometimes mess that up because it doesn't really matter what I call it, right? Just knowing that I'm going into these different corners. So now, if I show all my IDs, what I have is basically an atlas here of everything. And you can see that none of them cross over that border. However, some of them are actually getting a little close. So, what I'm going to do, just as an overall, the second layer of management, is I'm going to go to ID1 here. I still have my percent snap toggle on, which is actually set to go every 10%. So every time it ticks, it's 90, 80, 70, 60, okay? And so forth. So I'm going to hold control at the corner, but I'm also going to hold alt, and that's going to make it scale from the center. And one time down is 90%, and I'm just going to give myself a border. Okay? Then I'm going to do the same on channel 2. To absolutely ensure that this does not breach my quadrant. Okay? It really doesn't matter how small these get. Because what I'm going to do is I have created a texture in Photoshop that is literally 2 pixels by 2 pixels. It's 2 pixels across and 2 pixels tall. So basically at these quadrant points here, what I've done is I've used the different channels for them. So what I want to do is I'll just show you how we set up this texture that we're going to use. Actually, the model's pretty much done. I can export it, but I have to do one more thing. But I'm going to show you, in the meantime, what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to say 2 pixels by 2 pixels. Now that is unbelievably tiny, to the point where there's this little spot in there, and if I zoom in, you can see that I've got these little pixels here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control K, check my guides and grids. Now I'm going to do a grid line every 1 pixel, and then I'm going to show my grid. Okay, so I've got these 4 quadrants here. So what I do is I take my rectangular marquee tool, and I'm going to fill, hit D, the whole thing in black. Now if I look at my channels, my red is black, my green is black, my blue is black, and I don't have an alpha channel yet. Okay, so all I do is I come here and I make a selection here. I want to make sure that I am on View, Snap, and that Snap to Grid is on. Okay, Snap is checked. If I go to Snap to, Grid is on. It's important here. Okay, whether or not it lets you make a selection that's smaller than a pixel is irrelevant. You want to have this be snapping to the grids. Okay, so then I come to my channels and I go to just my red channel here. I click on it. Okay, highlight that, and I hit Control Backspace. Will fill it with my background color, which is white. Then I can take this and move it over, and I use my green channel and I fill that. Okay, I move it down to the next quadrant and I fill it with my blue, and then I go to my last quadrant and I just add an alpha channel. So now what I've got is this puny texture that has quadrants of white, okay, in each corner, exactly the way I have over here. So what we do is we use that second UV channel that's going to be embedded in this object in UDK to say, okay, I want to linear interpolate my texture 1, which is actually on this other UV channel, which is all of this piece right here blown up to the whole thing to match the texture. And it says, okay, well, use that texture over the whole object, but use this second channel's R channel, this second UV channel's R texture channels. It's getting a little confusing to explain, to linear interpolate that on here. Okay, and then I do the same thing on this guy. Say, okay, linear interpolate this piece. You know, I want you to lay the whole texture out, because remember, this on UV1 is taking up the whole thing. It's matching the texture. This is going to be using UV channel 2, and which you can see all of the faces here are confined into this quadrant, which matches up with this green piece of this green channel of this texture, which makes it fully white. And as we know in a mask, white shows, black cuts out. So while it is perfectly logical, at the same time, yes, it is a hair bit confusing in a way, especially if you've never done this before. But the key here is to quadrant these things out. Now keep in mind that using this texture here, we are limited to only being able to combine 4 textures into one. If we wanted to combine more textures into one, we would need a new file, and we would need, say we wanted 8, we would do 4 by 2, and if I zoom in on that, you can see now I can actually have 8 quadrants here. Okay? If I wanted it to be 9, I would do a 3 by 3. And it's not saying you have to use every one of these, but let's say I have 5 textures. I would use this. I would use 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. And then in Max here, I would further shrink this into another quadrant, and you can see the more that I shrink these down, the more individual textures I can have. So I can have up to pretty much an infinite number of textures in one single material. The only thing you want to be concerned about is your total memory texture usage. You don't want to have one material that has, you know, 256 4096 images on it and put that on one model and expect your game to run good. It's not going to happen. There's a limit here, and 4 2048s, and actually this is only 3 2048s, and the bullet is only a 1024 image. there's no issue. Now, it really doesn't matter the size of the texture. This could be a 256, this could be a 4096, this could be an 8000 if it's assuming that it support that. But if I was doing this for Max, I could do that. So that's the basics of what we need to set up in 3D Studio. Your UV channel 2 needs to look like this, with each individual one of these IDs put into one of these quadrants to match whatever mask texture you have. Now the thing is that if I'm doing it this way, you got to remember the other kind of cheat, which is not really a cheat, but it's a, you know, cutting a corner, is the fact that we are using the separate channels here. Now any one texture only has a maximum of 4 channels. It's R, G, B, and alpha. There's no way to say alpha 2 here. You can have it in Photoshop, but you cannot have that in UDK. It will not take 2 alpha channels. There's no way to say I want a red, green, blue, and a gray, you know, like a plaid channel or a brown channel. There's no, you know, it's RGB. That's what my monitor is using. So remember, each individual texture has 4 channels maximum. 100% guaranteed, no ifs, ands, or buts. Okay, maximum 4 channels. So if I were to do this one, I'll do it really quick. Let me go to my RGB layer, and I'll just fill in with black. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, I want my red channel, boom. I want my green channel, boom. Okay. I want my blue channel, okay, and then I want my alpha channel to be the last one. I can save this out and call this like 8 mask 1 or something like that. And then what I need to do is actually take all this and move it down, okay, and then also my alpha channel needs to move down, and then make sure that it's filled black up here, okay. So just go to the RGB channel and fill that black, and now you can see that I've got a second row here of these little quadrants, and I would save this out as 8 mask underscore 2. So I would need 2 masks, because if I need to go any higher than 4 individual channels, I cannot do that with one texture. And there isn't anything saying that if this was my RGB, I couldn't say, okay, mask channel 5, mask channel 6, and export a completely full-blown, completely separate texture for each one of these channels. But that's a waste, because then you've got 4 or 3 channels in here that are exactly the same, so why not use them? It's black and white information. It's grayscale information. That's all a mask is. That's all we need on the texture. And again, the beauty is that you can do this in 1 pixel, which if you were to think, technically you would think, you know, okay, this is 1 pixel. Okay, so if this thing is 1 pixel, how big is this right here? It's not even existent. It's like 0 space, right? Mathematically, however, it is not 0 space, okay? It is not going to 0, alright? But it doesn't matter, because what it does is, even though, yes, it's very puny inside of a big, huge white pixel, it is still within the white pixel. So it masks it as white. It tells it to, okay, draw on this, you know, go ahead and mask the whole big giant texture right here. So this method that I came up with, which, I mean, I don't know if anybody else has done it, I call it genius, and I'm just going to say it and leave it at that. I think that this is it's brilliant. All right, and the other thing is UDK actually supports up to 4 UV channels. So using all these different UV channels and using different masking layers and things like that, you can get extremely in-depth, extremely complex materials without using a single extra material. Okay, so with all that said, and that I've bragged, okay, which I really don't like to do. I really hate talking about how great I am, except when I'm talking down to my team and making sure that they feel horrible about themselves. I'm just kidding. I never do that. You ask them. Here's a key. If I export this out right now, what is going to happen is this is going to come into UDK with 4 separate materials, because if I come here, my IDs are still separated here, and every time I split an ID here, I get a new material in UDK. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to select all of these guys and put them all on ID 1. Okay, come out of here, go back to here, and hit edit. Now this has a potential to screw up. Just want to warn you that this could potentially not be in the right position, but it is, because sometimes it will reset this once you've made a change to your model with this in the stack. It no longer knows what's what. Okay, but in this case, and considering that I'm using Max 2012 here, it's actually UV management stuff is actually a lot smarter. Max 2010 tends to more often collapse these things back into nothing, and you actually have to copy and paste. Now, if you are on a different version of Max, or you're using Maya, or using some other program that doesn't really manage your UVs so well and tends to lose the information, most of them, and I know Max 2010 has this, has the ability to select all your faces, say edit, and copy. And then once you've done edit and copy, you can always come back, apply a brand new modifier, set your channel, select all the faces, and paste it back in, and it should put everything back into the position as long as you have not added any detail, change the ID vert, the IDs of the verts in any way by cutting a new detail or whatever. It should still work. Okay, same kind of theory as a morph target. A morph target, you're not allowed to rearrange the actual IDs of the vertices by adding new detail. It will not morph between the two objects anymore. They have to have the same reference IDs on every vertex, because as most people know, each individual vertex on any 3D model has an ID number. So as long as those are still the same, copy and paste works absolutely no problem. So now what I can do is I can export this, bring it into UDK, and I'm actually ready to go. But there is one final step. I do need to give it a material so that UDK does kind of recognize that it has a material here. Now, what I'm going to do here really quick is basically, if I come here, next to diffuse, if I hit the M, which is actually going to be blank for you, and I choose up here, if I click on standard there, choose bitmap, okay, it's going to ask me where, it's going to want me to navigate to some textures. Okay, so I'm just going to navigate to my main diffuse here and hit open. Now I'm going to apply that to the model. Okay, I can just drag it to the model. Now if I show this map, what you're going to see, if I hide this, is that the ammo bag has that diffuse texture on it too. Also, this piece has the wrong texture on it, and so do the bullets, because this one texture is applied. It looks good on this stuff, but over here it's just laying out on everything. And this is where it is literally the most confusing. This is where it can throw you off the most. You think, oh, well, my model looks all screwed up because, all my freaking faces don't have the right texture on them. Now there is a way to set it up here in Max to do the exact same thing, and it's called a composite. And you can composite textures on top of each other using any mask you want, and that mask you can tell to use a separate UV channel. So I can do that here in Max to make this gun look correct using all those materials. However, it is a complete and utter waste of time, because who cares? Unless I want to render this from 3D Studio, which I don't. I want to, if I'm going to show this in preview, I want to show it running in the game engine. So you can effectively get the same effect here in Max, but it's really not going to do you any good. It's not like it's going to go into UDK that way. You still have to set up a different system of material styles in UDK. So, but I do need to at least assign a bitmap to it, and I just decided to show that particular one. So hide this here. Okay, so this is how your gun's going to look when you just apply any one material. Now if I pick the ammo bag as the actual image, you can see that the whole thing goes ammo bag. Okay, if I pick the bullet, the whole thing's going to go bullet colored. Alright, no matter which texture I pick, it's going to put it over the whole thing. However, if you look, the ammo bag itself is correct, right? So we're going to overlay these on top of each other, mask them on top of each other. So enough said. I think I've driven the point home, and that was something that I really wanted to make sure that we're doing. is that, yes, we are double channeling this, okay? And we've quadranted out the second UV channel, okay? That is the main theory. Now, what I'm going to do is I need to save this scene. If I unhide all here, you see I still got my bones and whatnot here. So this is going to work as a skeletal mesh. We'll accept all of this information, absolutely. Okay, no problem. And it'll work, and we'd be able to skin it and rig it and all that stuff, and it's going to work fine. I've used this on a Jeep, and the Jeep has 4 2048 textures on it, and it works fine. It is a skeletal mesh with bones and everything. Okay, so I need to save this out. I'm going to save this as M60 a static underscore UDK, and what I need to do is stop the recording, and I need to actually go to my UDK machine, my computer that's running UDK, which is actually a completely different computer altogether, because this computer has tons and tons of hard drive space, and that's why I record on it. That way I don't run out of space, because when you're recording tutorials, you end up with 20-30 gigs worth of video files that all need to be compressed down and whatnot. And my other computer, my working computer, is actually getting up to its limit with all my files and everything. So I do switch computers for this, and I'll start the next part, which will be exporting this, which is going to be simple. Just going to be file export selected as an ASC file, okay, wherever the hell I want to put it, doesn't matter. And then I'm going to import that into UDK, and then I'm going to import all the textures, and I'm going to set up the material, and I'm actually going to be done. So I will see you in the next part.